I hope you all have been able to really utilize the tools, really have some key takeaways, and are ready to close out this series, putting it all together. Again, we're stacking the deck. We're building here. We're trying to look at how do we get to sustainability, and we can't do that without talking about leadership, development, talking about how do you connect it all to mission advancement. So we're going to get into that today. So let's talk about where our true focus is going to be today. So our true focus today, we're going to be addressing the strategic challenge of building sustainable talent pipelines and development pathways. We're going to build on the first session from becoming a strategic partner. How do you identify where you should focus your time and how to get buy-in? And then we took it to how do you address the needs of a multi-generational workforce while still ensuring business outcomes. Today, we're going to really talk about some frameworks to look at strategic talent acquisition, pipeline development, and then succession planning. Now, this is going to help you create the sustainable workforce capacity that you need in your organization. So the learning objectives, we have 3 learning objectives. We have strategic talent acquisition. So we're going to talk about how to design strategic talent acquisition approaches, and hopefully this will help you to look at how you can reduce those extended vacancies and just turnover in general, as well as make better hiring decisions. Number 2, we're going to look at development pathways. We're going to talk about how do we create development pathways that's going to help you re-engage and retain your people. So we got to talk about skill building. We got to talk about progression. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time today in this area, as well as talking about succession planning. And with succession planning, we're going to dig into what that looks like as far as being able to identify critical roles, develop your internal talent, but also look at how do you sustain your talent. And so we're going to take a deep dive into that as well. So again, we're closing out this series, really trying to put it together with the goal of sustainable transformation. So we're going to continue to do this through CoreStrategy HR Solutions philosophy. We've already talked about transform and align. Today, we're really going to focus on achieve. So let's talk about where we've been. So Claire shared a little at the beginning around the first session, second session. We're taking this to the finish line now. We have talked about that strategic positioning. You have learned some business language, how to communicate what you're doing, as well as how to base it on outcome-based metrics, not just activities. You also learned a little about connecting performance to purpose and really looking at that through the lens of multi-generational teams. So before today, you should have completed your strategic HR foundation self-assessment and the aligning performance and rewards roadmap template. So why does this matter today? Because today we're going to build on that. We're going to talk about the sustainable talent systems to attract, develop, and retain people who demonstrate those competencies that we talked about in the prior sessions. So we're going to put it all together. This is a comprehensive system. And if you put it all together, you will see where you're able to focus on people, purpose, process, and that is going to help you to really truly align, transform, align, and achieve in your organization. So I'm just going to fill this in here. I've already talked through these. This just takes you through our roadmap, where we started, strategic HR foundation. We talked about generational dynamics. We talked about connecting performance to purpose, connecting recognition to performance and purpose. And today we're going to talk about strategic talent acquisition, development pathways, and succession planning. So that will complete our transform, align, achieve foundation here. So I want you to take a moment to self-reflect. This is going to be our achieve moment. And it's focused on sustainable leadership and talent capacity. I want you to really think about, number one, your talent pipeline, and really answer this question to yourself. Do you have strategic partnerships or development pathways that create sustainable talent pipelines? Again, this is a self-reflection as we're going through today's session. And then secondly, succession planning. If a critical leader left tomorrow, do you have ready now internal successors? Something to think about. And the reason this is so important is because we know there can be real challenges when it comes to talent capacity in senior living. There are real challenges that we face in senior living that have to do with having those extended vacancies. And that can put strain on resources and your team. Inconsistent hiring practices that really produce poor selection decisions. You have early turnover that really makes the recruitment cycle seem endless. You have leadership gaps, and these really emerge because there's no real succession plan in place. And then you have people who are great at what they do, but then when they leave the organization, because let's say they retire, no one has captured that knowledge to be able to move it, to sustain it, as well as evolve on it. So with that, there's an opportunity to have a real holistic, interconnected talent ecosystem. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. We're going to talk about how do you move from separate processes to integrated systems. So we know traditional HR, that is where you're managing recruitment, development, and retention, but it's usually all separate. What would happen if your talent ecosystem was integrated? And you really thought about integrating it so that you're focusing on people, purpose, process. It all makes sense. It all works together. So here are some talent ecosystem components that I want you to really take with you today. And as a reminder, we do send out copies of the slide, and you will get a tool at the end, which I'll talk more about later, where you will be able to come back and revisit this as well as apply this in your organization. So talent ecosystem components, strategic talent acquisition, creating quality pipelines. So strategic talent acquisition, we're going to talk more about that. That might look very different than what you're doing. And there might be some internal work operationally that needs to occur before you can even start to practice strategic talent acquisition. Then you have development pathways, and that is really building up your internal capacity, focusing on your internal talent. Then you have succession planning. This is ensuring that you have leaders ready or in preparation for getting ready so that you can continue to serve your mission. You have the knowledge transfer. Again, this is where you are preserving that knowledge before someone leaves your organization, either due to voluntary resignation or retirement, etc. Then you have career progression supporting retention. Not everyone, and I'll talk more about this, not everyone is going to want to be a leader. Some people are just okay with the positions they're in, but there's always an opportunity to pour into others to help them grow. And that could be job enlargement instead of more of a promotion, so to speak. So let's first talk about strategic talent acquisition. So we have to move beyond post and wait recruitment. We know in senior living, you work with your department leaders, you work with those hiring managers, you identify there's an opening, you post the opening, you wait for people to apply, and then you hope for the best. That's pretty much the traditional reactive recruiting approach. So while you're waiting, there is a missed opportunity because that cycle will most likely continue because it's not very intentional as far as you helping to identify who you really need in that organization to advance the mission. So for strategic talent acquisition, this is all about building partnerships. Now, this is going to help create ongoing pipelines where people are coming and wanting to work for you instead of you having to seek them out when you have an opening. You're going to cultivate relationships before vacancies occur. We're going to talk about some partners and how to do that. You're going to select candidates demonstrating organizational values and competencies. The prior session, we spent a lot of time talking about organizational values and competencies. You want to select the best candidates that's going to really exemplify that and really help advance the mission. You're going to create entry points for diverse talent pools. That means your partners should not all look the same. You might be looking in different locations for talent. We know in senior living, your competitors are not just other senior living organizations. Your competitor could be Walmart. Your competitor could be Target. Your competitor could be fast food. Your competitor is very diverse. You have to think about how do you diversify your talent pool as well as your partnerships. So let's talk about strategic partnership types. I have 4 types listed here: educational institutions, professional associations, community organizations, and industry collaborations. So educational institutions, this might seem very familiar to you, especially if you already are working a lot with your local community colleges, local universities. If you are in an area where there are community colleges and universities, you are in a really good place. If you're not, you have to be more intentional and more creative with your partnerships. So for educational institutions, you have nursing schools, you have community colleges, you have internship programs, you have what we call guaranteed interview programs. And that is really a partnership with your local educational institution to really make sure that they are training and developing that talent. And when they are trained and ready, that they will have the opportunity to interview with your organization because of that partnership that's been created. You also then have professional associations. These are your state healthcare associations. These are certification bodies. These are those career fairs, the conferences, any events where you can position your organization as an employer of choice. Then you have community organizations. Now you're going to see here, I have workforce development programs, but I also have community colleges listed again. That is very intentional. Community colleges are gateways for your local community. So beyond what you think about as a community college on the surface, there's opportunities where they can connect you more broadly to the local community. That's why I list them here. Again, thinking more creatively and not traditionally how you use your ties with community colleges is important. You also want to think about the access to non-traditional talent pools and thinking more creatively about, okay, well, let's go back to like session 2 where we talked about what do you truly need in a role, not just your basic job description. What are the skills that are required? What are those skills that can be developed? And then where do you find your talent? And then lastly, industry collaborations. This is probably something many of you are already doing. If you're not, I highly encourage that you get on a listserv for other HR professionals in the industry, as well as other leaders that work in senior living, because there have been times in my career where I have worked with other senior living providers when they've had talent where they didn't hire the person because, again, they had so much top talent, but they recommended them to my organization and it turned out to be a pretty good fit. That is where we were helping each other out because we knew talent was scarce. Also want to look at developing grow your own programs. You should be developing your people. I always say if you're not connecting and engaging with your people, they are going to leave. They're going to leave. People need to know that they matter, but they need to know, like what we talked about from the very first session, how do they connect to the bigger picture? So from here, we have to look at how do we improve the selection of the right person to join the team. Values-based selection process, this is really focusing more on not only technical, what someone can do and credentials and experience, but you're also looking at how will they fit in with what you need in the organization to help achieve goals, to help advance the mission. So there's a 3-component selection process that I want to share. Number 1 is technical competence. This is around, can they do the job? Like, that's number 1. You need to know people can do the job. Values alignment. Will they demonstrate our organizational values? Also very important. If you are not asking questions, that's part of, you can embed this in the application process if you have that capability with your applicant tracking system, i.e. the ATS, to embed that. I highly recommend that. But if you're not capturing it there, it should be captured in the pre-screening process. You should understand how will they demonstrate the organizational value. And it can be something as simple as here are our organizational values. Which value resonates most with you and why? And how do you see yourself contributing to that value in our organization? It could be something as simple as that added in. But then you also have the cultural and motivational fit and engagement. This I combine together because this is all about, will they thrive in our environment? I have been in positions where maybe 2 out of 3 have been checked, but then that 1 did not match and the entire experience was not aligned for me. And it showed in how I was present in the role. It showed in my motivation and how I was engaging with the team. And so I mention this because these can work together to help you identify the right talent. Now, let's say everybody checks all 3. Does that mean they're going to be perfect? No, it does not. And again, I have been doing this for quite some time. I have been in a position where I felt like, wait, this person checked all the boxes, but then they joined the team and there was a mismatch. That is where I had a learning lesson where I went back to the drawing board because I needed to better understand, did we rush this? What were the actual questions? Did we need to dig deeper? Did we need exploratory questions as a follow-up to be able to pull out a little more? So there's definitely a lot of learning lessons behind this, but this is a good framework to really build out your value-based selection process. So let's look at an example. We're going to use that value that we started with in session 1, pursuit of excellence. Here's your traditional question. How do you provide resident care? Now let's enhance this and make it values-based. Tell me about a time when you had to balance efficiency with respecting a resident's desire to maintain independence and personal care activities. How did you approach this situation? This is what this question reveals: an understanding of person-centered care, patience with residents that require extra time, It demonstrates problem solving that honors residents' autonomy. And again, very important here, values alignment with dignity-centered approach. So this all what it's revealing is a connection back to the organizational value, which is what you are looking for someone to be able to contribute to. The path forward, the interview and performance management connection. So there is a true connection between organizational value, your competencies, how you interview, and then hiring someone, and then being able to measure their performance and really just help them develop and continue to grow in the organization. So you can see here, I have highlighted in the white here in these columns, values-based interview questions. So you have that question that I read off in the prior slide, but then you also see performance management evaluation criteria. And I just use the annual review. So what are the actions that's going to help demonstrate what you were trying to capture for that competency that you asked in that interview question? Now you're going to evaluate them while they're employed. Those are actions such as demonstrates a sincere commitment to serving residents, anticipates and addresses resident needs promptly, etc. And then you have the performance rating scale and definitions. Your scale can look very different. Again, this is a scale that I put together just as an example to show what this could look like. And I kept it simple. I just used 3 different categories for this rubric. So I have does not meet, which is performance does not align with value, meets expectations, performance aligns with value, and exceeds expectations, performance aligns with value and has exceeded their performance and development goals. That exceeds expectations is important because you should be looking at how do you develop your people throughout the year, and definitely at their annual evaluation. There should be some additional steps so people aren't just left with, you did a great job this year, but what's next? How do they continue to develop? That's what we're going to talk about. So now we're going to talk about the development pathways and what that looks like. So we have to think about how do we create development pathways. There needs to be a clear career progression, and that is going to help you retain your people. That's going to reduce that early turnover. So employees we know leave when they cannot see advancement opportunities. If you have development pathways, it's going to help them visualize where they are from entry level through leadership roles. And not everyone is going to be on that trajectory for a leadership role, but everyone can learn and develop. And you can be a learning organization where people feel like every day there's something for them to contribute to. So let's talk about this here through the lens of role levels with clear requirements. So this is what we're going to look at as we're talking about creating development pathways. Skill development needed for advancement, timeline expectations for progression, support provided for development, and that's so important, the support there. And then number 5, recognition of advancement achievement. So these are the 5 steps we're looking at when we're talking about creating development pathways. So let's see this in practice, and we're going to look at this through the lens of a clinical lens. So I selected certified nursing assistant, i.e. CNA. You all might call them care partners. You might have just different titles, but this is what I know in senior living organizations. This is a common position, and this is usually the role where you have someone that wants to know what's next for them. Now, you can apply this to your food service, i.e. dining services. You can apply this to your community services, to your lifestyle activity, whatever you have, you can look at creating something similar. I am just showing an example here because I wanted you to see the progression from that prior slide that's taking you to look at the level, requirements, timeline, development focus, support provided, and recognition. I want to focus here on, let's focus on CNA 2. Most people, unless you are a freshly new CNA or fresh out of school, you have some CNA experience. So let's say you're a CNA 2. And let's say the requirements for CNA 2, you have that defined. This could look very different in your organization. You might say, well, we need more than that for CNA 2. True, you could, but again, this is just an example that I'm building out here. For the CNA 2, you have 12 plus months experience, and then you have the timeline usually that it takes someone, and that is really the timeline it takes someone if they enter the organization as a CNA 1 to progress to like a CNA 2, average timeline. And then you have development focus. This really talks about specialty care skills, mentoring newer staff, quality improvement participation, support provided. This is where the manager in the organization will look at providing that training, that peer mentoring opportunities. And then how do you recognize? Through pay increase, title change, team recognition. That goes back to the prior session where we talked about rewarding and really aligning based off multi-generational, etc. So this gives you an example, and you can see I broke this down from CNA 1 through CNA supervisor. Now, if we look at this through the performance management and development connection, I want to continue to build here. We started organizational value. We talked about the competency and definition. We talked about how do we select the best person based off value-based interview questioning. And now we're looking at this through, you've hired that person, you are evaluating them. Now you need to look at, you've evaluated them, what's next for them? How do you develop them in their role? So that they are maybe preparing for their next role or just developing, continuing to grow where they are. Because we haven't got to succession planning yet. We're going to be at that very shortly, but this is just clearly about developing. So my point with this slide is the annual review is going to capture if someone is demonstrating the values for your organization through the competencies. But then you're going to want to ensure that you're continuing to invest in that employee by ensuring they have a plan moving forward. So for this current CNA, this person has an annual performance rating that meets expectations. And here are the identified professional development goals for the upcoming year. Mentor new staff, join and actively participate in the Quality Standards and Safety Committee, and enroll in the Emerging Leaders Program. This gives this CNA a path forward. So let's transition to succession planning. And this is a big, heavy topic. You're going to want to come back to this section and probably peruse it a few times, because I'm going to share a robust framework in this section to really help you all. But first, before we get to succession planning, we got to talk about strategic workforce planning. If you are not forecasting what you need, you will always be reactionary. You will always be in crisis mode, and that's not a good place to be. I don't know about you, but I don't function well when I'm in crisis mode. Some people, they see it as a rush. I don't. Okay, so I like to plan. I like to prepare. I know I can't know all the unknowns, but I can do as much as I can to make sure that when I get to the unknown, it is less pressure on me to move forward. Okay, so there's a 3-component analysis framework that I want to share. When we're talking about strategic workforce planning, this is all about forecasting. It's all about truly being strategic in how you are identifying and planning for your workforce needs. This means you need to think about session one. You need to be clear on what your short-term and long-term organizational goals are. You need to be clear about your role. You need to be partnering as an HR business partner across the organization, because that is really how you're going to find out where the needs truly are. Here's an example of a missed opportunity. So let's say you're always recruiting, you're always finding talent, they're always leaving, and then you find out later that you have just had this posting up, but it does not actually identify what you need, because instead of, we'll just use CNA, instead of a CNA one, the entry level CNA, you actually need a lead CNA, but you didn't communicate across the board to really understand, like, these are the actual competencies that you need. And we also need to be planning out for what happens in 2 to 5 years, because we got to make sure we have the workforce ready to move into leadership roles. Well, that is definitely a missed opportunity, because that requires a lot of rework and reactivity. So what I'm sharing here are the 3 components to really support a framework that's going to help you to really prepare. Number 1, retirement risk assessment. If you have a robust HR management system, HRIS, however you refer to your HR system, if you have a robust one that does an interactive reporting, please utilize that. That will help you. A lot of the systems now will help you identify risks for exits in your organization, but also will help you quickly look at demographics and just years of service. And that will help you identify, oh, this person over here is going to be leaving in the next 3 years. So what's the plan? So we got to have a plan in place. So really looking at a retirement risk assessment is important. Then you have internal talent supply analysis. I'm going to share with you a talent management grid, and that should help you as far as looking at this topic through the lens of performance and potential, but we're not going to jump too far ahead here. But you want to look at internal talent supply analysis. You need to look at where's your talent? Are they ready? What is their readiness? Because you could have the talent, but they might not be ready. So what are you doing to develop them to get them ready? And then lastly, strategic talent decisions: build, buy, borrow, bind, and bounce. These are all core components of strategic workforce planning. And most of these, you're going to be able to really look internally at what your talent. So build is definitely internal. Buy, that is external. You're bringing in new talent. Maybe that's a specialized role or skill that you just don't have in-house. Borrow, that is where you could be bringing in a contingent workforce or using consultants to fill in gaps that you have. Bind, that is where you're looking at your high potential succession plan, your pipeline there, which we're going to get into shortly. And then bounce, those are the people that leave. Those are more of your boomerang employees. They left, but maybe circumstances change and they want to come back. You want to continue to engage with them, keep them connected. So I always say everyone that leaves your organization should leave with dignity and respect, and know that their contribution was valued and that they are still valued if they decide that they do want to come back to the organization. So let's look at the succession planning framework. There's a 5-step succession planning process here. Number 1, you're going to identify 3 to 5 critical roles that would significantly impact operations if vacant. You're going to assess current readiness and risk for each critical role. You're going to identify internal successor candidates at ready now and develop enroll stages. You're going to create targeted development plans for successor candidates. And then number 5, you're going to implement knowledge transfer processes, preserving institutional wisdom. All of this really supports where we started, where we talked about why this is important to senior living. What we're talking about here is really identifying, and then you have to get people ready. And then those that are leaving, you want to honor what they have, but also preserve their knowledge as well. So let's talk about step 1. Step 1, you have to identify the critical roles. These are the roles where if the vacancy would significantly disrupt operations, that's a critical role. If there is specialized knowledge or relationships that you need, that's a critical role. Recruitment would be lengthy or difficult. That's another one that falls on the critical roles. And then leadership transition impacts organizational strategy. Now, when you look at this, most of you probably fall mainly in that first one, vacancy would significantly disrupt operations, or the last one, leadership transition impacts organizational strategy. I've seen that a lot, but again, you could have this all over based off what I've shared here, and there could be more. This is what I am providing here to really help you look at and really tackle step 1. Step 2, assessing succession readiness. This is where you are looking at your talent through the lens, who's ready now? So who does not need any training, any preparation? Who is currently performing in their role way beyond what they have been assigned to do? Who has the potential to serve in that role? Then you're going to look at ready in 1 to 2 years. This is someone where maybe they could take the role, but they would still need some coaching. They would still need some support. So maybe in another year or 2, they will be fully ready. Ready 2 to 5 years. This is someone where maybe it's our CNA 2 that we talked about earlier, where that person is developing themselves so that they can become a lead and then later be able to take on more of the CNA supervisor role in a 2 to 5 year time frame. And then there's the external hire, because you don't have anyone ready internally, so you got to go outside to find talent. Now, the complication with the external hire, well, let me start with the positive. The positive is that external hire can bring in different ideas, creativity, innovation, but then also the downside of that is how it could impact your morale, especially if you have someone that is capable internally. But if there is no one capable, then that is a learning curve for that person to learn the organization, the culture, etc. Step 3. Now, many of you might be familiar with the 9-box tool. This is where we're going to identify internal successor candidates. This is where you have that 9 quadrant, and you're going to look at it's a 3x3 matrix with 9 quadrants. This is where you're looking at performance and potential. And this is best when you have a larger organization that really has mature talent management processes. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. That means that it does take time. It requires time for calibration and discussion across the board. I have conducted exercises where I've simplified the boxes, but what I'm showing you here is how I've translated this, and I'll show you on the next slide, how I've translated this into a talent assessment framework that really helps you look at performance and potential. Why is this important? This is important because you're not looking at successors based solely on performance. I stress that because someone could be a high performer, but they have no interest in leading. They have no interest in moving to that next position. They just want to do what they came to do. So maybe that if we're looking at this grid here, maybe that is your purpose anchor. They are a high performer but low potential because they have no interest. They told you, I don't want to do this. I just want to come to work and excel in my current role, and I really don't want to do more, but I fully support the mission. I just don't want to take on a leadership role. These are people that you want to retain and recognize. Now, when you're looking at this grid, you want to be sure that you're looking at it through, and again, you're going to get this, and this is going to be shared with you, looking at where people are to identify what type of support they need, because we talked about development and support earlier. What type of support they need, i.e., that could be training or coaching. So if we start at the bottom here, you will see transform. You will see transform starts with critical action required. Those are the people where you have to truly manage their performance, and you have to put them on an action plan to try to get them where they need to be. These could also be people where they end up exiting the organization because they are just not working out for the organization. So in addition to succession planning, this grid can help you identify where there are true opportunities, especially if you're going through like a restructure or reorganization, true opportunities to realign your talent with what your organization needs. But that is a different topic. I don't want to digress into. That's more strategic workforce planning. But for the purpose of this, when you receive the playbook that you're going to receive after today's session, you're going to have a copy of this grid. You're going to have all these definitions. You're going to have the application tool to help you get started. Where you really want your people to show up ultimately is achieve. And achieve, that is mission champion and sustained contributor. Those are the people that have high performance and either medium potential or high potential. Those are the two categories where you're truly looking at, these are the people we need to figure out how to move them to different roles. Now, your emerging leader, absolutely, that's also another role where it's under a line, but this person has medium performance and high potential. This person could definitely move to high performance with that additional training and support. And we're going to talk more about that in the next slide where I bring this together for you. But again, I encourage you, come back to this grid. This is where I place the 9 box on the transform, align, achieve spectrum here. And I really identify what it means to coach and action to be taken if you use this system. So for this example here, I'm going to fill this in here so I can go through this. So what you're looking at for step 3 for identifying internal successor candidates, what this looks like is you have your, if you're using that 9 box, you have your performance assessment, then you have your potential calibration, and for your potential, what I really want to point out, for potential, you want to focus on 3 evidence sources: manager observation and feedback, colleague feedback, and employee motivation and interest. Please do not forget, employee has to want it. I've been in positions where I've wanted something more than someone on my team, and I've seen potential in them, but they just did not want it. And those are the people where I'm like, okay, I will support you the best I can, but if you're not looking to move into a different role, I respect that. And then number 3 here, you have the 9 box grid placement. After you complete 1 and 2, then you will be able to place on the grid Again, I'm showing this as a visual. The application tool is going to be available to you in the playbook that you receive. So fill this in here quickly. This is what it looks like for a CNA. So if we do a CNA 2, we have that same CNA that was a meet expectations. We have the development goals, and we look at from that performance eval. Now we're looking at that calibration, getting the feedback from across the organization. And based off that feedback, now we know the potential rating would be high potential. And because this person has capacity beyond the current role. So for the 9 box, again, it's a very useful tool, especially if you're looking at how do you plan for succession and thinking about not just one level above, maybe 2 or 3 levels in the future, but it's very important that you have development plans for everyone that you have identified as a successor. So what happens if this CNA was and exceeds expectations instead of a meets expectation? So it could look very different. So that means the placement will look very different. The same employee with a high potential but exceeds expectations leads to a totally different outcome. So that would put this person, instead of being placed in emerging leader, which the CNA is right now due to median performance and high potential, this person would be a mission champion with high performance and high potential. And that means that succession readiness would be accelerated at that point because of where this person is with their current performance. So key insight, performance level significantly impacts succession readiness and outcomes, even with high potential. Step 4, creating targeted development plans for successor candidates. I've mentioned this. This is just a visual to show you this person, the CNA 2 as emerging leader, what their development plan would be. And then if we were developing them in 2 to 5 years, what that would look like for succession planning. So you can see the elevation here for what it would look like for the succession plan. This is, again, just a holistic view where we started from organizational value and we took it all the way through succession planning. Step 5, you want to make sure there's knowledge transfer. There has to be documentation. You have to identify what are the relationships and roles needed for the successor to be successful. You have to have transition plans in place. That is a lot of planning. You have to have mentoring and redundancy for successors to succeed. This is all where you're thinking about those support and resources that I mentioned earlier. So I have to mention multi-generation succession planning. So what I'm putting up here, we talked about the challenges last session, some solutions. You want to make sure that you are thinking about flexibility in your plans for succession planning. You're thinking about maybe phased retirement approaches, mentorships, reverse mentorships, and you want to record the documentation again for the knowledge before people leave. So your next steps, you are going to be receiving the Building Sustainable Leadership and Talent Capacity Playbook. This is approximately a 35-page document. It is digital, similar to the other tools, but it is going to take you through talent ecosystem mapping, performance development, strategic workforce planning, and succession planning. So I put an action required, but we don't have another session, so you can opt out of this. What I'm just saying here, I like to give you some to-dos so that you can turn what you're hearing into application, because that is where knowledge transfer occurs, through the application. So the action required is to complete the activities in the playbook as part of the complete strategic HR leadership journey. This is going to help you connect session 1 and 2 and bring it all together. So we've covered a lot. everything you have now is going to help you become a strategic HR leader or enhance your toolkit to be able to support sustainable transformation across the board for your organization. So we are at the end here. So I'm not going to do the poll because I want to make sure that we have some time for Q&A, but I want you to really think about how you will apply what you learn. So I really want you to think about how you're going to apply that. So this is more of a self-reflection as well. Feel free if you're able to share with each other in the chat. I would definitely take a look in the chat and see where people landed, but I want to make sure that we have some time to really close out here. All right, so when you get the slide deck, success metrics, I encourage you to come here because this is going to help you identify how do you measure the impact for everything we talked about. Because remember, we talked about outcomes, not just activities. All right, your key takeaways, pretty much what I've already talked about here. You have talent ecosystems, you have strategic partnerships, you have career pathways, and now you have succession planning. And with that, that is your complete strategic HR foundation for this series. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you for helping us think more intentionally about how we build leadership pipelines and create sustainable approaches to talent development. So we'll now move to our question and answer time. If you have a question, please feel free to send it as a chat or unmute yourself. I have a question in the chat. You all will receive the slides, and the HRCI code has been sent for both of the previous sessions via email from my email, Claire@LeadingAgeVirginia, and you'll receive that information again today afterwards. And I have another question in the chat. I understand the importance of building internal leadership pathways, but more often than not, we are focused on filling open shifts and keeping operations running, even though I wish it were different. And how can we begin investing in leadership development in a way that feels realistic with day-to-day responsibilities in mind?
So that is not an uncommon challenge because mainly what you're doing is you are focusing on compliance, you're focusing on filling roles, you're focusing on being that service provider in HR, but there has to be intentionality. And that really takes us back to the first session. You have to become that real strategic HR business partner. You have to make a case for why it's important. If you are able to be in those spaces with leadership, that means you're bringing real data to share. This is what I'm seeing. This is what we could do. This is why people are leaving, because we have the data to show. So if we have these pathways, if we do these things, this is where we could end. And I have used that several times where I've been in an organization where everything was operations and we don't have money for this and we need to do this and we need to do that. But when you really come with a thoughtful plan and have conversations with the right people, that is where you're going to get buy-in. And I've said this before in a prior session. It's nothing wrong with piloting something. You don't have to roll it out across the entire organization. So maybe if you're seeing where, let's use CNA, if in healthcare and health services, where that's where the biggest turnover is, partner with your administrator over there, your director over there, and maybe develop a program you can pilot and roll out, and then work out those kinks, and then be able to launch it across the organization. Piloting is how I got a lot done in senior living instead of just rolling everything out at once.
Any other questions? Well, as we come to a close today, Andrea, thank you. You've helped us connect the dots across these past few weeks in very practical ways, from strengthening HR strategic positioning to aligning performance and expectations to now building sustainable leadership and talent systems. You've given us a thoughtful framework that we can continue to apply in our organizations. And thank you all for being a part of this learning experience. We're so grateful for you, for your engagement and commitment to strengthening your teams and organizations. You truly make a difference every day. So you'll receive a follow-up email later today that includes the slides, HRCI activity code, and the other information that Andrea outlined for you. I'm going to, for those of you seeking NAB credit, I'm going to share my screen. All right. Please take a few moments to complete this survey. Your feedback helps us continue to design meaningful programs for members, and completion is required if you are seeking NAB or HRCI credit. So thank you again for joining us for this series, and we hope the conversations and ideas shared over the past few weeks will continue to support your work in the months ahead. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.